If you've ever felt like someone looked right through you, like your presence was a convenience instead of a gift, this is for you. If you've given everything, stayed loyal, and kept showing up even when no one clapped for you, you are not weak. You are rare. You are powerful. And today, I'm going to remind you of that power. This message isn't for everyone. It's for the man who's been consistent without applause. It's for the one who stayed quiet while holding back storms. You've been misunderstood, undervalued, taken for granted. But that ends now. What you're about to hear will reconnect you to your purpose, your dignity, and your strength. If this message resonates, support the channel. You're not just helping me, you're helping thousands of men who've been quietly suffering in silence. Your support keeps these insights accessible. It's time to shift. And we begin right now. They thought you'd never leave because you were always there. You answered every call, you stayed through every storm, you forgave, you gave, and then you gave more. Until one day, something inside you broke. Not with a loud crash, but with a quiet realization. They never saw you. Not the real you, just the version that served them. You were never appreciated, just expected. And that realization, it changes everything. The ache of being overlooked. You gave your heart with no conditions. You didn't wait for them to prove they were worthy. You didn't hold back parts of yourself or ration your kindness. You gave it all. You gave your time, your energy, your attention, even on days when you had none left for yourself. When everyone else found reasons to walk away, you found reasons to stay. When they made mistakes, you offered grace. When they were distant, you leaned in closer. You chose understanding over blame. You swallowed your frustration, not because you were weak, but because you believed that peace was worth preserving. And as the days passed, without you even realizing it, you started to disappear inside yourself. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You stopped expressing your needs because you thought they would see you, feel you, without needing to be told. You minimized your own pain because theirs always seemed bigger, louder, more urgent. And slowly your presence became background noise. You were always there, always giving, always loyal, but rarely seen. You thought love meant endurance. You believed that patience would eventually be rewarded, that staying consistent, even when things were hard, would make them value you more. But instead of admiration, you got assumption. Instead of gratitude, you got silence. And you began to carry the weight of the relationship alone, emotionally pulling both of you forward while quietly hoping they'd notice the effort, the strain, the exhaustion behind your smile. But they didn't. You kept waiting for the moment they'd look at you and say, "I see you. I see what you're doing. Thank you." But that moment never came. Instead, your love became invisible. Not because it lacked power, but because it was taken for granted. And no matter how loudly your soul screamed to be noticed, their silence screamed louder. So, what happens when you keep showing up for someone who stops seeing you? What happens when your love is no longer received, only expected? You begin to shrink, not in body, but in spirit. Your voice, once confident and expressive, grows quieter. You start second-guessing your own thoughts. You wonder if you're asking for too much when you simply want to be appreciated. Your joy, once radiant and alive, dims slowly with every overlooked effort. Your confidence begins to crack under the pressure of being enough for someone who never acknowledged how much you gave. They didn't need to insult you. Their silence did that. Their indifference did that. Every time they ignored your words, every time they brushed past your kindness, every moment they failed to say thank you, it chipped away at your spirit. And somewhere along the way, you stopped believing you were valuable. You stopped believing your love was special. You began to wonder, maybe I'm just not enough. But that thought, that lie, is the most dangerous thing you could ever believe. You were more than enough. You were overflowing. You were selfless, present, devoted. The problem was never your lack of value. The problem was their lack of vision. When you give your best to someone who doesn't recognize what they are receiving, you will always feel empty. Not because you didn't have anything to give, but because you gave to someone who didn't know how to receive. And that emptiness isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their blindness. Your love was never the issue. Their inability to honor it was. Still, you're the one paying the price. You're the one left carrying the emotional debt of all the thankless nights and quiet tears. And while they move forward, unbothered and unchanged, you're left questioning everything. But here's what you must understand now. Your healing begins when you stop tying your value to their recognition. Your power begins the moment you stop trying to earn something you never had to beg for in the first place. You were not meant to be tolerated. You were not designed to be invisible. You were made to be seen, heard, and deeply appreciated. And so now, it's time to return to yourself. It's time to take back every piece of you that you gave away hoping to be seen. Every moment of patience, every quiet sacrifice, every ounce of emotional strength, it's all still inside you. But now, it belongs to you again. You are not a shadow in someone else's life. You are the light in your own. And from this moment on, you don't just show up for others, you show up for yourself first. Because the ache of being overlooked is real, but so is the power of waking up. The cost of always being there. Being dependable is one of the most beautiful traits a person can have. But when that dependability is never appreciated, it begins to feel like a curse. You were the one they could call at any hour. When things went wrong, they knew exactly who would answer. You were the one they leaned on when life got heavy. And at first, they were thankful. At first, they noticed. They may have even said things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And for a moment, you felt seen. You felt needed. That fleeting sense of appreciation kept you going. But over time, something changed. The calls still came, the problems still landed on your shoulders, but the gratitude faded. The thanks turned into expectation. Your support stopped being special. It became standard. You weren't a person with feelings, boundaries, or your own emotional needs. You were a role, a function, a lifeline on demand. And while they continued to take, you kept giving. Because you thought that eventually they would realize what you were doing for them. You believed that if you kept showing up, if you stayed consistent, if you gave a little more, they'd finally open their eyes and see you, truly see you. Not just as someone who could solve their problems, but as someone worthy of love, respect, and equal care in return. But that moment never came. Instead, your continued presence made you invisible. The more you showed up, the less they noticed. The more you held it all together, the more they assumed it was easy for you. And it wasn't. It cost you something every single time. They didn't see the late nights you stayed up thinking about how to help them. They didn't notice the way your own dreams began to wither because you kept putting them on the back burner to support theirs. They never asked about your stress, your fears, your silent battles. They never considered that you might be tired too. And you didn't tell them, did you? You didn't ask for much. You didn't demand their attention. You just kept showing up, hoping your actions would speak for themselves. Hoping that someday they'd return the favor. Not because you needed saving, but because being supported shouldn't always be a one-way street. But here's the painful truth. They saw your consistency, and they stopped valuing it. They assumed it would always be there. In their mind, you'd never walk away. You'd never stop caring. You'd never stop catching them when they fell. That belief, that they could keep relying on you without ever reciprocating, became the most dangerous illusion they held. And that illusion is what destroyed the balance. Because eventually, even the strongest support system begins to crack under the weight of being one-sided. This is how self-worth quietly begins to erode. Not through dramatic betrayal, not through a single earth-shattering moment, but through small daily acts of neglect. Through being seen only when you're useful. Through being appreciated only in words, but never in action. You begin to question yourself. You wonder if you're the problem. If maybe you're asking for too much. If maybe you just need to give a little more, stretch yourself a little further, stay a little longer. But you're not the problem. The problem is that they mistook your kindness for obligation, your loyalty for weakness, your presence for permanence. And the longer you stay in that dynamic, the more you begin to abandon yourself. Not because you want to, but because the silence from them feels louder than your own inner voice. You stop honoring your limits. You stop setting boundaries. You start making excuses for why they don't show up the way you do. And each time you do that, you move further away from who you truly are. Because love, in its healthiest form, doesn't drain you. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It doesn't require you to be the only one trying, fixing, sacrificing. You've come to understand something now, something deeper, something powerful. Love isn't enough if it's one-sided. Your effort, no matter how pure, is not a substitute for partnership. And your loyalty, while beautiful, should never come at the cost of your dignity. What you've been calling love might actually be self-abandonment. And that's the part that hurts the most. Realizing that you stayed, not because they deserved it, but because you hoped they would grow into the person who did. You waited for a version of them that only existed in your mind, a version that would finally see your worth, finally show up for you the way you always did for them. But they didn't change. You did. You woke up, you saw the pattern, and now you know. Staying loyal to someone who doesn't value you isn't strength. It's surrendering your own worth. And that's a price you're no longer willing to pay. The rise within the silence. There comes a moment, and it doesn't always come with noise or a clear decision, when something inside you changes. It doesn't come from anger or a dramatic confrontation. It comes quietly, like a gentle breath after drowning in silence for too long. It happens when your soul gets tired of screaming in a place that never listened. And in that moment, you stop chasing clarity from them and begin finding clarity within yourself. You stop waiting for someone to see your worth and start seeing it with your own eyes. That's when the shift begins. You no longer feel the need to explain, to defend, to fix. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in being understood. It's found in knowing yourself deeply enough that being misunderstood no longer shakes you. Walking away isn't about revenge. It's about respect. Not for them, but for you. It's about finally putting your energy where it belongs, into your healing, your growth, your future. You don't slam doors. You don't send dramatic messages. You just stop. You stop trying to remind them of your value. You stop showing up in spaces where you feel small. You stop bending yourself to fit into places you were never meant to stay. And for the first time in a long time, you breathe. It's not an easy breath. It's heavy, thick with grief and memories. But it's yours. It belongs to you. And that alone makes it powerful. You realize now that you weren't broken, just buried. Buried beneath obligations you never agreed to. Buried beneath expectations that crushed your spirit. Buried beneath the silent weight of carrying both your pain and theirs. But now you're rising, not with noise or drama, but with stillness and clarity. You rise quietly, steadily, like dawn after a long night. There's no announcement, no audience, just a slow, intentional reclaiming of your identity. And every step you take forward is a step away from the version of yourself that had to beg for love, for attention, for basic decency. She may never understand what she lost. She may never realize the depth of your presence or the power of your consistency. And truthfully, it no longer matters, because this isn't about her. It's about you, your healing, your restoration, your rebirth. You no longer need closure. You don't need an apology. You don't need her to realize what she had. You've accepted that some people can only see your value after they've lost access to it. And even then, it's not your job to confirm their regret. You've woken up. And in that awakening, you've remembered who you were before you let their love define your worth. You've remembered your dreams, the ones you shelved so they could chase theirs. You've remembered your voice, the one you silenced to avoid conflict. You've remembered your purpose, the one that got lost while you were too busy carrying someone else's emotional weight. And now, you are reclaiming it all. Not loudly, not defiantly, just consistently, quietly, powerfully. This rise, it's not for show. It's not a performance. It's not a message to anyone else. It's a message to you. A reminder that your story didn't end in heartbreak. It began in self-discovery. You're not walking away because you're bitter. You're walking away because you're better. You're better for what you've endured, stronger because of what you survived, and wiser because of what you finally understood. Your presence is a privilege, not a punishment. And the moment someone treats it like anything less, they forfeit access to it. You don't owe explanations for your evolution. You don't need to make anyone understand the quiet battle you fought to get here, because those who get it will never take you for granted again, and those who don't were never meant to come with you. You've outgrown the place where your value had to be explained. You've outgrown the version of you who accepted crumbs when you deserved the feast. And now you stand taller, you walk lighter, you speak with more intention, because you're no longer trying to be seen. You are finally seeing yourself. This is the rise, and it begins in the silence, becoming unreachable. There comes a point in your healing journey when you stop needing to explain your growth to people who never valued your presence in the first place. You no longer feel the urge to be seen, validated, or acknowledged by those who looked past you when they had the chance. That phase of your life, the one where you tolerated being ignored, misunderstood, undervalued, is over. Not because someone finally came along and convinced you of your worth, but because you discovered it for yourself. Deeply, quietly, permanently, you've learned that the most powerful form of self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't need applause or announcements. It speaks through the calm in your spirit, through the stillness in your energy, through the firm, silent boundary that says, I'm not available for disrespect anymore. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you stopped showing up. You don't owe them a breakdown of the years you gave, the loyalty you offered, or the emotional labor you carried in silence. The very fact that you kept giving while going unnoticed is all the explanation they will ever need. And one day, they will feel it. Not in a dramatic moment, not in a scene you orchestrate, but in the ordinary moments of their life, when they reach for you and you're no longer there. When they go to call you and hesitate, remembering that the version of you who used to answer without hesitation has evolved. You are no longer in the same place. And more importantly, you are no longer the same person. They will remember you. That's inevitable. Not because you forced them to, but because true presence is unforgettable once it's gone. They will sit with new people and subconsciously compare them to the one who never gave up on them, the one who stood by them in silence, who understood them in ways they never took time to appreciate. They'll remember your patience, your kindness, your quiet strength. But by the time they realize what they lost, you will have become someone they can't reach. Because growth isn't just a journey forward. It's a boundary that prevents you from circling back into places that hurt you. You've built a new world now. One where you're valued, not just used. One where your voice matters. One where love doesn't demand that you disappear. Being unreachable doesn't mean you've become bitter. It means you've become selective. It means you've learned to protect your peace the way you once protected others. It means you've stopped handing out access to people who mishandled your soul. The man who used to stay too long, give too much, and explain himself, endlessly has been replaced by a man who understands that silence is not weakness. It is wisdom. That distance is not punishment. It is preservation. You've stopped participating in emotional transactions that only left you feeling depleted. And in that space of silence, you've built something sacred, self-trust. There's a new energy about you now. One that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't prove. One that moves through life with dignity, knowing that what you offer is rare. You've stopped trying to convince people of your worth. That job is no longer yours. Now, you focus on being whole, on showing up for yourself the way you used to show up for everyone else. You've become the kind of man who no longer waits to be chosen, because he knows, deeply, that he is already worthy, already enough, already complete. And the most powerful part of this transformation? It's quiet. No one saw it happening. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it meant you were rebuilding. They thought your absence was surrender, but it was strategy. They didn't realize that while they were assuming you'd always be there, you were becoming someone who would never tolerate being overlooked again. Now, you live in a space where you're celebrated, not tolerated, surrounded by people who don't just take from your strength, they honor it. You're no longer the background character in someone else's story. You are the main character in your own. You've learned that real love doesn't require you to shrink. It expands you, it elevates you, and you won't settle for anything less. Not anymore. So, when they finally wake up, when regret begins to surface, when the emptiness sets in, it won't be your problem. It won't be your responsibility to comfort them in the consequences of their carelessness. You won't be reachable. Not because you're cruel, but because you've moved on. You've healed. You've grown into someone they were never prepared to receive. And that version of you, he's not coming back. You were never invisible. You were evolving. And everything they ignored became the very thing that elevated you. Their blindness doesn't define your value. Your growth does. And now, your silence speaks volumes. You're not angry, you're awake, you're not bitter, you're better. And from this moment forward, you don't chase love. You attract respect. If you felt every word of this message, support this channel. Share this video. You're not just helping this content grow, you're helping thousands of men who need to hear this message. Men who are one heartbreak away from losing themselves. Your support ensures these insights reach those in silence, those in pain, and those on the edge of giving up. Let's remind them they are not alone. Comment unstoppable if you watched until the end. I want to know who's really rising, who's really transforming, who's ready to never shrink again. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and stay connected. We're building a brotherhood of men who refuse to be ignored, who rise with dignity, who walk with purpose. Support the movement, reclaim your voice, and most of all, never forget, your worth was never up for debate.